Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. Super really excited to talk about this topic of static web apps. So before we really talk about static web apps and what they are, let's get back in time and talk about the web 1.0, like the first iteration of the web. So that's actually was the era of web documents, web pages, HTML, and links, and the it looked like something like that actually, that the first like an escape browser. Yeah, lots of forms, and most of the HTML was, I mean, before being generated by the server, it was written by hand. Like most of the documents were static and linked together through links, hyperlinks. And then, yeah, we were able to generate content on the server using some sort of server-side technology like Perl back then, where you had to construct all the like the content type and the HTML page and serve it to the browser, which would then had be to render the HTML document. And you could also provide like an action for forms, for instance, that points back to another CGI endpoint, common gateway interface endpoint, for instance, to handle the user's input through forms. And then you had, of course, to write all the logic on the server side. So this kind of model was based on the client sending the initial request and the browser constructing the end HTML document and sending back to the browser, which would then render it. So that's like the basic Web 1.0 model. Then came the Web 2.0 as the like the first Web 2.0 definition came from the Silicon Valley folks or something like that. That was, you know, the web of textures, like great textures, high definition textures, and drop shadows, really cool effect, like realistic shadow depth effects as well. And of course, nice icons, as you can see, photographies, illustrations, glossy buttons, you know. And I mean, I'm joking, but I did that. Like, this is my first website I built. I was at university back then following courses on quantum computing, and I was so fascinated by the topic that I had to build my website. That's the first one, and it, as you can see, is heavily inspired by Web 2.0 design and all the arabesque and everything. And yeah, I really had fun, and I learned a lot of stuff building that. But however, I mean, the real benefits we got from Web 2.0 are these concepts of single page applications. And one of the best examples back then, I think it's 2005, the first like Google Maps like app website, where you could just click on the map, the interactive map, and find like get directions or find business. But like the most like the revolution from this kind of new kind of application was that I mean, you could do all of this without refreshing the page, without the page being refreshed and fetched from the server again. And this single page app architecture was made possible thanks to the AJAX technology, asynchronous JavaScript and XML. So the traditional web, as we saw earlier, was like the client has to make a request, an HTTP request, and all the HTML got constructed on the server side and then sent back to the browser. Whereas with a single page application model, we go through this AJAX interface where all the requests are made like asynchronously to the browser, to the server, and we got back a structured information, structured data that we had to re-render on the server, on the client side, without any page refresh. So fun fact, did you know that the first like release of the AJAX was in around 1998, and it was made possible by the Microsoft Outlook Web Access team, who actually developed the concept behind this XML HTTP request scripting object. And the first public release was made in 1999 inside Microsoft Internet Explorer 5. So yeah, that's a really old technology, but we like it got really mainstream in maybe 2006, I guess, thanks to jQuery. So yeah, that was Web 2.0, and next we had the Web 3.0. So basically, that was the web of like the semantic web, and the first definition of semantic web was made possible by Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the godfather of the web. And with the help of the World Wide Web Consortium, the W3C, they promote this new kind of web. And basically, the standard tried to promote the new data formats on the WWW by encouraging the inclusion of what we call like semantic content in traditional web pages. So basically, yeah, this semantic web aimed back then at converting the existing web that was dominated by unstructured documents into some sort of web of data. And the main idea behind this is to make data more, I would say, readable by machines. And back then, yeah, we also saw the rise of exchange format like RDF, Resource Description Framework, or APIs like SOAP back then. So yeah, that's the history of web we have. We had, and we're building on top of that. So yeah, my name is Wassim Chegham. I work on JavaScript at Microsoft. And this is my talk about the new era of static web apps. Spoiler alert, there is nothing new about this. And yeah, let's explain what I mean by that. So what is a static web application? So basically, a static web app, or a SWA, is simply a traditional single page application, but with a little bit of superpowers. What I mean by that is a static web app is supposed to be fast to load on any different network or device. Also fast to render. And given the two of these criteria, it should also be fast to use and reduce the what we call the TTI, the time to interactive. So this is basically reducing the time from when the page finishes loading and when the browser finishes rendering that page. That's what we call the web app gap. So we want to reduce that gap and allow the users to instantly use our apps. And preferably, static web apps also can benefit from the modern cloud APIs, like fetching data from servers API, for instance. As I said, there is nothing new because that's built up on the single page application model. So obviously you can use any technology stack, your favorite one, HTML, JavaScript, CSS, even Angular or Vue, or maybe some sort of static site generator like Jekyll or Gatsby, for instance. And if we look back at the kind of architecture of a static web app or a modern static web app, we still have this, this familiar single page application architecture. But then we also like fetch all the static content from some sort of like a CDN, like the nearest CDN to the user. All the communication between the client and server are still asynchronous. And here we can also fetch data from a serverless API, as I said before. And of course, those serverless API can also communicate with distributed and remote database endpoints as well. So at Microsoft, yeah, we got feedback from a lot of our customers and users, and we came up with a new service called Azure Static Web Apps. Ta-da! So Azure Static Web Apps is can simply build and host your static web apps. That's like the main idea behind this service. And you get also some other like uh, high, great features around that. For instance, authentication and authorizations with security roles and things like that. And you could also benefit from a serverless API thanks to Azure Function. So that's included in the service. One of the my favorite feature actually would be this one. Azure Static Web Apps can automatically, or as I would say, automatically set up and configure a CI/CD for you based on GitHub Actions. I have an illustration for that in my next slides. You get also some free stuff on top of this, like custom domains and free SSL, a renewable SSL. And also everything is geo-distributed across all the globe in, I think, like 5 regions. When it comes to auth, we have like the mainstream browsers, providers, excuse me, that are built-in and supported. Of course, we have Azure Active Directory, GitHub, Google, Twitter, and Facebook. So this is the typical workflow that you get from Azure Static Web Apps when you set up and configure the service. So typically you would, of course, push your changes to your GitHub repo. And initially, when you set up Azure Static Web Apps, the service connects to your GitHub repo, and this is where it sets up the GitHub action for you. And every time you make changes, like even create a pull request to on your repo, or just like push to a branch, the GitHub action triggers a build. So we're gonna build your static web app, your SPA, and of course we are gonna build your API if there is any. This is optional, and then everything is gonna be deployed on Azure Static Web Apps and hosted on a provided domain. And of course, you've also get authorization and auth if you want to. Of course, I've built a demo app for this talk. Let me show it to you. Clicking on it. So this is simple, funny application. This is an Angular app, V10 RC2. Of course, as you know me, this is using the latest Angular. It's basically a GitHub badge. So you connect with your GitHub account and you get some nice static information about your followers, repos, and your gists. So we click on the login button, obviously, and then using the built-in authentication endpoint provided by Azure Static Web Apps, I was able to here connect with GitHub. That's an example. And then using the information I got back from this other authentication flow, and then request information from the GitHub API to get my picture and the other stats. There is an Easter egg actually in this app. Let me just log out. If I hit Shift and then I reload my app, click login again, and then now I'm using Auth0 as my authorization provider. So same principle, same workflow, but then this time I'm using Auth0. That was like simple to implement, and you can easily switch between providers with ease. Getting back to my slides. All right. So yeah, that was Azure Static Web Apps, our new service. It's in preview for now, so please give it a try. These are like three links that points to the documentation, and there is also a tutorial on how to publish your either Angular, React, Svelte, or a Vue on the service using a serverless API. We also have set up a GitHub repo with so many examples and like gallery code, as I said here. We also have like stencil demo apps and Polymer and a lot of those. And before I finish my talk, if you are interested, you can get your learner badge, the summer badge from the Azure Hero program. So basically just scan the QR code and follow the instructions. And then if you have any question, you can reach out to Sherry List on Twitter. She would be happy to help you with that. So that was it for me. Thank you so much for having me. And I think we have a couple of minutes if you want me to either answer questions or maybe show you the portal, the Azure portal.